and Scrutiny Committee meeting, which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will be held virtually with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please can everyone ensure all microphones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received the electronic copy of the agenda on Wednesday the 25th of August, and for the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I'd ask, at the exception of myself as chairperson, at all times keep your cameras and microphones switched off to help minimise background noise and interference. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. If any members wish to speak, to raise a point or question, they should please click on the raise your hand button at the top of the Teams meeting window, and I'll come to you in turn. Please do not use the instant messaging chat to answer questions or to enter questions or comments. So I'll now ask the Scrutiny officer to announce the names of the councillors in attendance.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name's Lucy Beard. I'm the Democratic Service Assistant, soon to be a member of the Scrutiny team. The members of the committee in attendance are Councillor John Paul Blundell, Councillor Jane Gibby, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Kay Rawlins as Chair, Councillor Rod Shaw, Councillor Tim Thomas, and Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Can I welcome you to your role as well? I'm sure the Scrutiny officers are looking forward to you starting. Moving on to agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Gareth Howells, Councillor Spanswick, Councillor Gebby will be leaving at 11, and Denisha will be, sorry, I shouldn't call you Denisha, will be leaving at 10 o'clock. Alex, please, Alex Williams.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just here as well, so I don't think my name is called.
Lucy, have you noted Councillor Williams, please?
Yes, I have. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, please.
Which one?
Tim Thomas.
There's Ross as well, so he's got his hand up.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I've got to leave at 11 o'clock for another meeting, unfortunately.
Thank you. And Councillor Penhill Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just confirming my attendance, obviously verbally. I need to leave at 10:30. It's I have a Monday morning meeting. Thank you.
Mark Shepherd, please.
Yes, Chair, just to say that Janine Nightingale is on annual leave, but Zach Shell is here in her place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's all the hands. So item 2 is declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in a matter on the agenda, please click the raise your hand button and I'll come to you in turn. Thank you very much. Item 3, for the approval of the minutes. Meeting held on the 9th of June. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for the meeting, for the minutes?
I'll move them, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell, and a seconder.
I'll second them, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gerby. So moving on to item 4 is the budget monitoring report, quarterly revenue forecast. I'll ask the interim chief officer to present the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, my name's Jill Lewis, interim chief officer, finance, performance and change. The purpose of the report in front of you today is to give you a picture of an update on the council's revenue position for Q1 as at the 30th of June. And I know time has moved on since this report was presented to Cabinet in July, but nevertheless we will pick up some of the key themes as we go through. So just to remind members, the council set a net budget at the 24th of February of 298 million. And this is the first progress report against that budget. So table 1 gives you a summary of the information. It sets out the projected position, which is showing at the moment a £1 million overspend, projected overspend, I should say. Now, I just want to remind members that, of course, we took an out-term report that I think I said at the time very clearly gave a very different picture than you were used to in terms of the financial position, and that was mainly because we had significant amounts of COVID money and additional monies, grant monies at the year end after we'd set the budget, and that gave a rather different position than you had been used to. And I did say at the time that once we got into the following year that you would see that there is still pressure, financial pressures coming through on many of our budgets, and that is very clear as we move forward now to the second quarter. We're finding terrific pressures, particularly in adult social care across the whole of Wales, not just in Bridgend, and other areas are coming forward with even more significant pressures than you would have expected for a normal year. So I think I want members to understand today that we still have those pressures. I know that members of COSC are also members of BREP, but this is a public meeting, and it is important that you look at the significant underlying pressures in some of the services, and don't just take from the out-term report that we appear to have a very good financial position, because that isn't necessarily the case. So table 1 gives you the projected position. This includes money that we've received from the Welsh Government, but not any money that's currently on hold in the hardship fund. And some of our COVID spend, of course, will not be incurred until quarters 2 and 4. So obviously that's not in there. That will put more pressure on the budget. And I think you've heard me say that our COVID monies from the Welsh Government will not necessarily continue in the way that they have. There's nothing in the table for the loss of income, as support has not yet been confirmed. We'll continue to claim against the hardship fund. We claimed 20 million last year. However, I think you've heard me say certainly previously that the Welsh Government are very much expecting some costs to taper off as we come out of COVID, and it's a word that they are using quite frequently, which is as we return to normal business and deliver the services as normal, whatever the new normal looks like. They are expecting us therefore not to have increased costs from COVID in the same rate that we had last year. I've already mentioned adult social care has significant pressures. There will be a continuation of assistance from the Welsh Government, and we've recently received confirmation of that. But again, there is an expectation that that will start to taper, but that has been extended obviously to the end of this year. We established the £1 million COVID recovery fund, which has been used very carefully on phased car parking offer, phased rental income increases for BCBC rental properties, waiver of sports fees, summer play, just a few examples of what that fund has been used for. And of course, again, to remind members, none of those things are claimable against the hardship fund, as local decisions aren't claimable against the hardship fund. So any extension of those will not be claimable and will be needed to be funded from our COVID recovery fund. Table 2 gives you a flavour of our COVID claims, with £2 million on hold. There's nothing in the projections for loss of income, as the claim is not due. The claim has only just gone in, but again, there's a view that that our income levels should return to normal on a tapered basis. So, for instance, our leisure services and our car park income, again, they would expect those to return to normal quite quickly. There's still pressure on council tax and council tax reduction scheme, and financial hardship is expected as furlough unfolds now in September. 1% council tax drop is £1 million, and there is still no support indicated yet from Welsh Government whether there'll be anything on that as there was last year. You'll see at 413 that pay and prices remains volatile. We still aren't absolutely clear on all the pay awards. There is certainly some indication that some of the teachers' pay will be funded centrally, and inflation is continuing to run at quite a high level. It had increased to 2.1% by May and is continuing to rise at the moment. Now, that's again something that we hadn't planned for. We've had very low levels of inflation for some time, and that remains pretty volatile. So we've got to make sure that we've got enough money in our prices budget, obviously, to fund everything that we need to do. You'll see, you know that we set out savings proposals each year. Table 3 sets out the prior year savings, so that's anything prior to this year. And they've mainly been achieved. There's a shortfall still of 310k that's unlikely now to be met, so we will have to consider what we do about that. And table 4 and appendix 2 shows this year's performance, which has been a remarkable achievement, I think, in many respects, in difficult circumstances. So all the savings, apart from the relocation of the recycling centre, which was delayed, so that's just a part year effect, are likely to be achieved. However, the bad news is that we continue to need savings over the life of the MTFS for 22-23 to 25-26. And you'll note from the projections that we're likely to need another 22 million, obviously depending on the level of settlements that we receive from the Welsh Government. So 4.3 onwards gives you a lot more detail on each of the directorates, but that was a brief overview, Chair, of our financial position at Q1.
Thank you very much, Jill. That's great. Members have some specific questions on the report itself, which I'll go through in turn as they've come in order of the report. And we'll try and keep it on the budget itself and not deviate from that. So first of all, if I can refer to, as you mentioned, the COVID Recovery Fund, was recovery financial? I can see that £35,000 has been put into car parking fees. For example, has that actually, how has that been successful?
I'm going to see whether Zach would like to pick up that question.
Yeah, I'll come in. Yeah, obviously in order to encourage footfall as part of the bounce back recovery from COVID, the offer has been made to, both with the 3 hours free in the Rue car park in Bridgend and the free from 12 till 3 o'clock in John Street in Porthcawl. What is incredibly difficult do well, not just difficult, impossible to do at the moment, is actually baseline the footfall against a norm, because we're not in a normal situation. So we can't say, well, because of the car parking offer, we've seen an increase in footfall of X number of people in the town centres, because of course during the pandemic, initially footfall was absolutely decimated. It is returning now, but still isn't back to normal levels. So it's very difficult to actually pin a number on it and say, well, this has made X amount of difference. But clearly it's very important, and that everything that can be done to help that return to the towns, to the shops, is really important. But yeah, it's impossible to put a number on that at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Zach. So if I can come back to Jill now, could you tell us a little bit more about the split between what's been spent on this with this 1 million, for example, what has been spent on summer play and waiver in sports fees?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm going to turn to Zach again, because I think he's probably got the exact figures for those. If he hasn't, then we can come back to you.
No, I haven't, I'm afraid, Jill. Somewhere in the archives of my hard drive, I will have all of the numbers, but I couldn't reel them off right now exactly how much we've had for sports fields off the top of my head. It's around, I think, every quarter that was allowed off is around about £33,000. So each quarter, and we have free sections to the playing season, so it's around about roughly 100,000 a year for sports pitches, but I haven't got the exact figures in front of me, but that's a not too bad approximation.
Okay, can I bring in Mark Shepherd, please?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Zach said some of what I was going to say. My understanding was about 120,000 for the sports fees, and the car parking offer, we believe, is about £18,000 to £20,000 a month, the current offer. Obviously, I think if it's helpful to the committee, we can provide that full breakdown, but those figures I'm aware of from a recent report.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Leader, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the summer play activity, we were planning to invest more in that programme anyway, because we felt it was vital that, given the 15-16 months that our children and young people have had, they had an opportunity to socialise, to play together outdoors, and just have a really enjoyable summer. Welsh Government then quadrupled, I think at least quadrupled, the amount of funding they normally award. So we didn't have to commit as much of our own resources as we were anticipating because of the additional funding from Welsh Government. But again, those details can be shared, and we still were able to provide the most comprehensive range of summer play activities for children and young people that I can never remember us offering. So that's an example actually of how the budget is so uncertain, because you make a plan, and that was a good change to the budget, because we thought we'd have to spend X amount, and that it was significantly less, because Welsh Government then makes an announcement, and we don't always know when they're going to make an announcement, and if they're going to make an announcement around additional funding, and then that changes the financial position. And of course the two biggest are around social care that I think Jill has referenced, and we hope that there will be more announcements throughout the year, recognising that the continued pressures that we are still under, because the impact of the pandemic is not over yet, and we continue to make the case to Welsh Government for funds for those additional pressures. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Jill, please.
Yes, just to suggest, Chair, that we could circulate a breakdown of the COVID Recovery Fund to members, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, Jill, this next question is for you, and it's picking up on the additional funding question with the Welsh Government and the claims. What are we actually asking for? What are we claiming for the loss of income? And I can see a lot of the 2.127 million is on hold or pending. Is it actually putting a financial pressure on the council with the staff actually trying to collate the information that the Welsh Government are actually asking for?
I have to say that the COVID claims have been incredibly pressurised and involved a huge amount of extra work for not just finance, for the directorates as well, because keeping a tab on anything that is claimable is really quite difficult throughout the year. And obviously we did those all last year. It was a huge amount of additional work, and we were incredibly successful in getting money back. So the 2 million that's on hold is really a time delay. We have had some of it through. I haven't got the exact figure in front of me at the moment, but we are hopeful that most of that will come to the council. The main areas of loss of income have been Halo and the obvious leisure. And the things that we've already mentioned, such as car parking, etc. So there was an ability to claim the car parking last year, but obviously where you make local decisions, which some councils have done, that's no longer available to us. And as I said, there's an expectation that as the leisure facilities, which is the main loss of income, start to get back to whatever they can. So I think what it does is it puts incredible pressure, because we're running almost two financial systems, trying to make sure that we've got COVID costs and COVID loss of income and loss of council tax and all the rest in separate areas, so that we are absolutely clear what that means for our financial position. But at the same time, as the leader has just very well exampled, sometimes the Welsh Government then give additional monies that throws all our forecasting into a mess. So I think you've heard me say the one thing that I can guarantee is that it's incredibly volatile and unpredictable. So yes, additional pressure, but I'm hopeful that we're very clear. We've got a very good relationship with the Welsh Government officials in terms of being clear what we can claim and what we can't claim. So we're not just throwing things in and hoping for the best. We're pretty certain that what we've put in can be claimed.
Okay, are we getting to a position where we're collecting the information rather than retrospectively picking it up now, just in case there's further claims that need to be made, and thinking about the pressures on staffing?
It's an ongoing issue, because new pressures arrive, and there's new guidelines each time. Adult social care has now been taken sort of aside from the main COVID hardship claim, and there's incredible calculations that have to be done to make sure we're getting it right and getting the right amount of money. So I think the pressure is still on, and obviously new pressures, but in the main, we've got into a routine of what we can claim and making sure that we do that properly.
Right, okay, thank you very much. I'll bring in Councillor Gebbie now, who wanted to ask her first question on the overspend on home care.
Thank you very much, Chair. If you just let me, bear with me, I'm on the wrong page a sec. I think for me, the report on page 19 talks about the net budget for social services and the underspend for over 600,000. Now, I can't understand how we're in that position when I know of the overspend, and I also can't understand how we're in that position just because of vacancies, when if you go on to page 20, they talk about staffing vacancies and delays in implementing a restructure. And then we talk about an overspend in the home care budget further on down on the fourth bullet point. So I'm really confused. Where are we with home care? It's normally overspent. You're telling me we're understaffed, we can't deliver the provision, but yet we've got an overspend as well. So I'm really confused by the narrative that we've been given. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gerbie. I don't know who wants to come in and respond to that.
I think Claire's here. Yes.
Hi,
yes.
Claire. You're on mute, Claire.
Apologies, first one of the
No
day.
problem.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think the situation in domiciliary care and care and support at home is a difficult one to explain and understand, really. We have got pressures across the whole system, I think, which are probably quite well understood, and we'll probably have some more discussion about them later on when we're talking about the annual report. We've got significant levels of vacancies in the in-house service, and that's where the underspend in-house relates to. So there is a restructure which is being consulted on at the moment. There is a big push in terms of recruitment into those vacancies in-house, and some actions in terms of being far more flexible around the contracts that we offer in-house in order to address what we think are some of the challenges that people perceive in terms of coming to work for us as a council. As a domiciliary care worker, you know, we shouldn't see the council being in the position that we are in, and there's some systemic issues that we need to address in that regard. At the same time, what we have seen is a significant increase in need for care and support at home, and our independent sector providers are providing more care and support at home than ever they have before. So I think we're 7% up in terms of the hours of care that are being provided this year compared to previous years through our independent domiciliary care commissioned services. It's still not enough to meet the need and demand that we have for domiciliary care services. So when Jill refers to underlying pressures within budgets, we are seeing underlying pressures in these budgets, despite the significant amounts of money that are being invested into care and support at home. So that hopefully goes some way to describing the situation that we're in, but there are some systemic issues that are being addressed through restructuring and advertising, and seeking to advertise on different types of contracts for the in-house service.
Thank you. Can I bring in the Cabinet Member, Councillor Burnett, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I spend my weeks looking at talking to Claire and looking at these figures, and the balance is completely off within social care. And until we can recruit and sort out our workforce issues, it's very difficult to reinstate that balance. And you know, I've said it many times, I can't underestimate how difficult the problem is and what our teams are coping with on a day-to-day basis, and how over a barrel we are in terms of external providers, because we are unable to recruit to our own internal workforce. So, I mean, our new normal in social care is an increasingly more complex care demand with an ageing population. We're not getting younger, we're getting older constantly. That pressure was identified years ago, and it hasn't gone away. We've got an exhausted workforce, and we're competing against other local authorities for the same exhausted workforce, whilst at the same time our retention is getting more and more difficult because of competition from hospitality and leisure and retail. So we are having to respond to demands and needs, and we have to pay in order to make sure that our residents are looked after. So you know, reinforcing our workforce and prioritising our workforce has to happen so that we can reset the balance going forward. Thank you.
I think Councillor Gerbie wants to come back in, please.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, both. I do understand the pressures in home care. I think the question that I would ask is if it was a significant pressure on recruitment elsewhere in the council. So thinking of a council-wide approach, we would offer market supplements. So are we in a position to offer market supplements to our home care staff? Because obviously that would negate some of the problems that we're having with the hospitality sector. Thank you very much, Chair.
Chair, do you want me to come
Yes,
back
please,
in on
Claire.
that? Yeah. At the moment, as a council, we don't have a market supplement policy. I understand that one is in development and well into development, and that will be a policy which will be brought forward later this year for consideration by members. I think in terms of the options that we're looking at to address the challenges we've got in domiciliary care and support at home, we're looking at any and all options. And I know that the next cost, not the next one, the next cost on the 23rd, I think, of September, it is COSC 3, is going to be looking in some detail at the action plans that we've got around care and support at home. It is a challenge that we don't just face in Bridgend, it is a challenge across the whole of Wales, and I'm sure that the whole of the UK, for many of the reasons that Councillor Burnett has just set out, and I won't repeat. There are some significant systemic issues. We face competition not just from neighbouring authorities, but for many years there have been issues in terms of parity of esteem with NHS workers who are doing similar, not identical work within the community with vulnerable people, and we have seen significant increase in need post-COVID as people have seen delays in accessing NHS treatment, the impact of long COVID, the impact of long period of lockdown, and the impact of stress on informal carers as well as on our caring workforce. So that it is, you know, as I sit here as director, it's the highest priority I have alongside some of the workforce issues in children's services, and we need action across the whole council and across the whole system to address these issues. What we see in the budget, and this is a budget report, is that it means that our budget spend doesn't align with where we would want that spend to be. So we wouldn't want to see that underspend in our in-house services. We would want our in-house services to be fully staffed. They're the cornerstone of our market. They're the cornerstone in terms of re-abling services, those short-term services which prevent big ongoing packages. And we would want to see a balanced budget in terms of our commissioned domiciliary care provision. So you can see that the budget position reflects some of the challenges that we've got in the overall service position. And one of the, I guess, the indicators of success moving forward will be if our budget spend aligns better with how we've set the budget as well.
Okay, can I ask Claire, once you've recruited the staff that we need, would we then have an overspend?
We've set our budget as a council, or you've set the budget as a council to meet and to pay for the workforce that we have, I guess, evaluated that we need. There's always a turnover of staff within any part of the council, isn't there? And in these type of workforce, this is particularly an area where you see turnover, you see the impact of sickness levels within this part of the workforce. So as a director, I would always seek to, within all the relevant permissions, to over recruit into this area, because we know that we're always going to need that workforce, and we can always make use, very, very effective use of that workforce in meeting the needs that we've got. So to be in a position where we balance the budget probably means that we have succeeded in those recruitment drives, and we're in a position where potentially we could see a little bit of overspend. What we would then look to do, and what we continue to be quite successful around in service and financial terms, is reducing that spend on care homes for older people particularly. So we've seen the number of people who've had their needs met through a care home placement reduce over the years. We've continued to see that, and I guess one of the positives that I see in the current situation is that despite all the pressures, we've not yet seen any increase in people who can only have their needs met within a care home setting. It's one of the risks which CIW and sort of highlighted in their annual report for last year, that they may, due to the challenges in domiciliary care, see people going into care homes sooner rather than later, but we've not seen that yet. So we would look to rebalance that budget and continue to rebalance that budget into more care and support at home, which is what the majority of people want, and reduce that spending in care homes.
Thank you, Claire. I'm sure there'll be more discussion on that later on agenda item 6. Councillor Burnett, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to emphasise Claire's point, really, is that an overspend in on those services will mean a saving in the higher care intervention in terms of packages of care. So it's really important, and I would like to see an awful lot more investment in these early intervention services, because the some of the single packages of care, when care needs escalate to their highest level, are extremely expensive, and they could be prevented earlier on. So we must be careful that we don't under budget for prevention, and that goes across social services. Where money is invested in prevention, we can offset costs further along the line.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. There's no further questions on that section, so I'll move on to, is Councillor Gebbie again at 4.2.2, and we've got questions on the Halo and utility bills.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, everybody. I feel like I'm taking over this morning. It's just in relation to the Halo contracts and the actual way that we're managing those contracts now. I appreciate that we've had COVID, and I appreciate that actually one of our prime focuses as a council is the well-being of our communities. But how are we going to consistently maintain subsidising them the way that we are? Because it's not working, and I know of various leisure provisions across the UK that have been returned in-house just recently because the providers are unable to carry on with what we're doing. So what measures are we taking, and how are we going to manage in the future, please?
Thank you, Councillor Gebbie. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, shall I come back in on this one as well? Yeah, so in terms of our partnerships with Halo and our cultural trust partner, we have worked very closely with them clearly throughout the pandemic to manage what has been a very, very challenging situation for leisure providers and cultural trust providers as a consequence of the lockdown and as a consequence of the reduced income which they've been able to generate, which has turned on its head really all of our usual performance measures and indicators that we would work through with them in partnership. We have worked very closely with Jill's team and with Welsh Government in order to maximise our claims in terms of COVID hardship, and we've picked some of that up earlier in the conversation. We've also worked very closely with them around their restart and recovery plans as restrictions have lifted, to look at how they've been able to maintain membership bases. I'm talking Halo now clearly, and what their plans are in terms of increasing those membership bases going forward. There's obviously been quite a lot of innovation and creativity during the lockdown periods to continue to provide an offer. So just highlighting things such as Halo at Home, which has been, really quite successful in terms of people continuing to access a service during the lockdown period. But now, as those restrictions are lifted, working very, very closely in partnership through our contract management arrangements with them to look at the impact on the contracts that we have as they restart and recover in terms of membership and accessing facilities across the county borough, which at this moment in time appears to be going very well. In governance terms, we have our advisory board, which is well attended by cabinet members with Halo in order to shape and to inform the future direction of services. And certainly what we will be looking for them to do is to both return to pre-COVID levels of activity and performance, but to build on some of that learning through the pandemic and to look at where they can be innovative and creative and continue to, make digital offers alongside physical offers and to make to widen that access into leisure and leisure services across the county borough, because it's so key to the health and well-being of our population, and to look then what the impact of that is on the contract and in respect of the subsidies and the investment that they get from us as a council.
Okay, are you happy with that response, Jane? Councillor Gebbie?
I think it's going to be exceptionally problematic, and I think it's something that we need to keep a big eye on. I'm also concerned that Halo reduced the provision of ICT prior to the pandemic. I appreciate that we're doing so much more online, and one of my concerns is vulnerable people being able to access their claims. Universal credit, PIP, anything like that, it's all vulnerable. We know that people are going to have a reduction in their monies. And I think we're saving up problems for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerbie. Claire, do you want to come back in on the library situation as the it was about the telephony claims, more so on the online applications and the ability to do it, or do you want to wait till that's maybe in item 6 when we discuss the report?
If I may come back in later on that, Chair, that would be better for me. Thanks.
Okay, I'll do that. Is that okay with you, Councillor Gerbie?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll bring in Councillor Martin Jones, please, who wants to talk about the overall report and the management of the budget.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Before the meeting, I actually wrote down on my book here, in relation to the budget quarterly review, what are the headlines of the report, what are the budget pressures going into the next quarter, and what is the overall corporate picture as we move through the financial year. And in fairness, Jill did answer many of those questions. I mean, we've been briefed this morning that we have a projected overspend of £1 million after the first period. There is significant financial pressures as we move into the second quarter based on an above average demand. We've also been briefed that the management of the budget is volatile and unpredictable. And we've also been informed that Welsh Government continue to provide grant funding, which understandably may very well be erroneous, but it is difficult to manage. So when we capture all this information, my question perhaps is this: what do we hope to achieve as we move into the next financial quarter?
Thank you, Jill.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, could you just clarify achieve in terms of, do you mean the underlying position? Can I just clarify what the question is?
Yeah, if you look at what we've been briefed on this morning, Jill, we've been briefed that we are £1 million overspent on the first quarter. There's an above average demand as we go into the second quarter, which will be significant budget pressures for us. Budget management is being described as volatile and unpredictable, which is entirely understandable when we're still in a pandemic. We've also been briefed that Welsh Government continue to provide us with some grant funding, especially to support adult services. With that in mind, Jill, what is our plan then? What do we hope to achieve going into the second quarter, having learned what the first quarter is telling us? Does that sound okay?
Yeah. I suppose I'm not anticipating a huge change in terms of quarter two. I think the volatility will still remain. There's still going to be quite a degree of uncertainty. The settlement, the AEF from the Welsh Government, is late. It's likely to be late again this year. I think the 21st of December is the latest date that we've been informed it'll come through, which is obviously going to give us all, I hope, a really good Christmas present. But until we actually get some indication of that level of funding, it is such a major factor in our MTFS. The council tax collection is obviously vital. So I would hope to get a little bit more certainty. The first quarter on council tax is always a little difficult because some people will have back-ended their payments, as it were, so paying over the 10 months, so April and and May are always a bad indicator, really, of where we are. Furlough is likely to unfold, isn't it, in September? So we should get a feel for the pressure on council tax reduction then, because as you know, that is a cash limited budget, and we don't get the funding. It's a set level, as you will have heard me say, at council for council tax reduction scheme, and anything that's claimed above that is Bridgen's issue. So the more people that claim council tax reduction, the more pressure on the budget. Now, if that becomes excessive, there may be some thought in the Welsh Government about whether there's any support. I don't know. So I would, and we also might get a little firmer indication on the way inflation's going and the way pay awards are likely to go. So I'm hoping by Q2 we'll have a firmer feel for some of the uncertainties. What I won't probably be able to predict is what might happen in the Q3 and Q4, because there could, who knows, the pandemic has given us a few shocks so far, hasn't it? And if we were to return to different levels of isolation or lockdown or whatever, then obviously that has a huge financial impact again on the budget. What I do know is that we need savings, and we need to have some by the end of Q2, which is not far off. So in October, I would hope that we have been able to highlight some areas where we think we can make some reductions, because I think you've heard from Claire the immense pressures in terms of social care, but there are equal pressures in many of our services, education, communities, and particularly in housing. We still have rising levels of homelessness. We put money into the budget, but that probably isn't going to be sufficient at the rate that we've got presentations. And so it's really, it's the level of pressures that for me, we have to control, and we also need some decisions on where we can take money from some of the budgets, and that's become increasingly difficult, as we know, over the years. You've heard me say it many times, we've taken best part of quarter of the budget out over the last 10 years. So these things are unpalatable. Nobody wants to reduce services. So that for me are the two parts of the equation. If we don't make any savings and we increasingly get new pressures, then we could be in real difficulty, because we haven't got the ability to find monies from elsewhere. Our reserves are healthy, but our general reserve is at the level that I expect it to be, so nothing excessive. We've got money, quite a significant amount of money in earmarked reserves, but the key is earmarked. The money was given to us at the end of the year last year, significant amounts, but it was all for a purpose. The Welsh Government just didn't say, here we are, have £10 million. They said, here's £10 million in grants to do A, B, C, D and E. So we couldn't suddenly use some of that money for a different purpose. So I think we will be in a firmer position by the end of Q2, providing we get those savings and we have a better idea of how we control the pressures. But as you've heard from Claire, the pressures are quite difficult to control in many of our services, and I know you've heard me talk about the homeless presentations. It's not easy to close a door when somebody's homeless. So that's the demand-led budgets are the things that are going to cause us difficulties. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but in essence, I don't think we can just hope that the Welsh Government come forward with a good settlement. I think we need to make sure that we've got, you know, a few tricks in our bag, or some backstops to make sure that we've got the savings there, we've controlled the pressures, because I think you've also heard me say this: if we plan for the worst, we just move everything forward a year. So if we've got 10, you know, items where we think we can save, we don't need to necessarily implement them next year. Then they're there for future years should they be needed, because I don't think there's going to be any doubt about the future settlements. I think they're going to be tough.
Thank you, Jill. Do you want to come back in, Martin? You're mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. And yeah, what is key here is Welsh Government support. So could we discuss what sort of discussions are ongoing at the moment with Welsh Government in relation to our situation? Because I'm sure our situation at the moment is replicated elsewhere across Wales.
Yes, absolutely. And some councils are in a slightly worse position, some are in a slightly better position. It does vary, but there is a huge consistency about local authorities, and a huge consistency about the things that they're finding difficult to fund, and the pressures have been very, very similar in terms of the claims on the hardship fund and the loss of income. So very, very similar positions. The Section 151s meet as 22. Remarkable attendance since the beginning of COVID for the last 18 months. We've met fortnightly. We've now gone to monthly with the Welsh Government and the WLGA. So there is, a huge amount of interaction. That doesn't mean that those officials have any insight into what the Welsh Government budget could look like. Ultimately, there are significant pressures from health across Wales and from lots of other areas, economic regeneration. I could go through a whole pile of them. So local government is just one voice at that table. Hopefully a strong voice. So we haven't got any indication, and I think where we have set our stall is probably at round about 1 to 2% as a hope. I know we had more than that last year. Bridgend did very well at an average of 3%. We had 4.3. If we got that, we'd be absolutely delighted, obviously, but we would still need savings because of the amount of pressures that are coming forward. So I would love to think that we'd have an indication earlier, but in truth, I don't think it's going to happen. There's too much uncertainty.
Thank you, Jill. Sorry, Martin, you're on mute again then.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much, Jill. Leader, please.
Yeah, just to confirm that obviously the representations at a political level mirror those that have been made at an officer level by Section 151 officers across Wales. And actually, currently, due to the acute pressures on health and social care, and because of the way that they are so closely related, and it is effectively one system, I, along with the WLJ leader, are meeting with the Health Minister on a weekly basis, where we talk about the pressures, the unprecedented pressures on social care, and we are making the case for that long-term investment in the system. And we do have a minister who is listening to that and certainly recognises the crucial role that social care plays of itself, but also in terms of sustaining our NHS as well. And in addition to that, we were like officers meeting with Welsh Government ministers on a weekly basis and then a fortnightly basis towards the end of spring and summer, and we will continue to bang the drum for the need for investment in local services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Can I ask, Leader, whilst you're there, so what kind of discussions do you have on things like our reduced council tax income? I mean, obviously, we don't know anything about what we're going to get at the moment, and can it be raised as a priority?
Yes, so we've done that as well, Chair. That's it's an important point, and we have had some support around that, because inevitably, certainly during the peak of the pandemic, when so many people were furloughed and people were experiencing significant personal financial problems, then we saw that additional support from Welsh Government, and there is a recognition that pressure has not gone away. There are still people who are finding it very difficult, and I know that Welsh Government are committed to reviewing the way that that local finance is raised. So it will be interesting to see the outcome of that work. It will obviously be a decision for Welsh Government, and we expect to be, and I'm sure we will be, fully involved in the process of identifying any changes. The difficulty will be, as ever, when you're looking at a system of taxation, is that unless you can reduce the amount that you want to raise through that mechanism, if there are people to be better off, then you're going to have people who are worse off. You have winners, you have losers. So there's a lot of work that will need to be undertaken.
Are we likely to have a bit more of an indication in Q2?
No, so I think that's more a long term, in terms of council tax reform. That's a longer term aspiration of Welsh Government. I'm sure Jill can come in terms of any indications from Welsh Government officials about whether or not there will be additional finance made available because of the impact on council tax collection now, because it has been a current pressure. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Hi, Jill. I know in the report at the time of writing we didn't have any indication. Have we got any indication of what we're going to receive in terms of the assistance there?
No, is the honest answer. I think council tax collection's still currently running at about 1% down, but as I say, the first quarter's a poor indicator of that. I haven't got the end of August figures because obviously it's the 1st of September, so I'm hopeful that maybe they're starting to have an upturn in those. We already set the collection rate, as you will recall, at council at 0.5% down on what we normally would do. So I'm just hopeful that by the second quarter that things may have improved. We have also been able to process some of the summons that were all suspended because all court hearings were suspended during the COVID year. So we've had some court hearings, but obviously as time goes on, the ability to collect debt becomes less. So we are processing those. So we're still hopeful that we will increase last year's collection as through that mechanism, as well as hopefully some upturn in this year's. But September's going to be pretty critical, September and October.
Okay,
so
thank you, Jill.
Should give us a better picture.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Gerby again. Sorry, Jane, I know you feel like you're taking over. It's just the order of the questions, how they've come in. So we're going to page 30 now, and regarding the pay awards. Are you there, Councillor Gerby?
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. She did just message to say that her screen had frozen and she was going to.
Oh, right. Okay, we'll come back to that then.
So she may be a couple of minutes.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to Com 3 on page 26. So we've got some more concern. Well, not concern. We want some more information on Com 19, 51 and 1. And I'll bring in Councillor Blundell, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes. Take members to Com 19. I was just wondering if there was, well, as the Chair said, is there any more information on that? Because it seems rather a vague, a vague reason. So I'm just trying to figure out how we've gone from amber to red and are now looking at total amount of saving likely to be 0. So I'm just wondering if there more meat on the bone of that, please, Janine or Zach.
Janine's on holiday, so Zach, can you come in, please?
Sorry, I didn't see her in the attendance list before I checked.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, a little bit of reassurance. I mean, the department is staying on budget and has committed to do that right through, despite not actually seeing to fruition yet a permitting scheme for roadworks. So they're managing their budget very well, and this has been one. It's, as you can see, it's been outstanding since 2017-18. So we've basically concentrated on other areas within the highways department over the years to make sure we stay on track with the budget. So there isn't a budgetary issue with this at all. Essentially, it is still something we haven't given up on. But it's very significantly long-winded. We're essentially looking to put into place a scheme that gives us better control over external roadworks when statutory undertakers, etc., gas company, electricity company, come along and do works on the highways. We want to put in place a permitting scheme that, as an aside, would generate some money, but that's not the purpose in it. The purpose in it is really to give us better control and to actually limit the amount of time that statutory undertakers spend undertaking works on the roadway. And there's schemes that are already in existence in England, and we're looking to try and put in place something similar. But it's something that doesn't exist in Wales yet, and it requires a change in legislation to actually allow it to happen. So we've been going back and forth with Welsh Government, with our highways officers, for a few years now, with business cases, refining them, to-ing and fro-ing. And I'll be perfectly honest, the pandemic didn't help either, because we just dropped it for a while, quite frankly. And it is still something that's on the agenda, and it is still something we're steadily pursuing. But at the same time, we've achieved our budgetary savings anyway, and when we get this, it will be almost a bonus now, so to speak. But it is something we do want to do. We do believe a permitting scheme for roadworks will be beneficial. Not sort of it was almost an aside as a budgetary benefit, but it'll be beneficial for the road users of Bridgend, who should see, faster turnaround times with roadworks, and a better, more highly resourced system of inspection and checking on the works that have been done. Whilst there is a system in place at the moment, this would be an improvement. So we will keep pursuing it, but it is taking some time to deliver.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back?
Carry on, please. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. You say it's obviously going to take some time. There's no, you can't just throw it out of the wall and think that's the date. But are we coming to an end? That this is going to be fixed soon?
It feels like we are, but then I've sort of been here before where I thought we were. So to be perfectly honest, and it's not, you know, entirely within our gift, but we have certainly presented a number of business cases. We've refined them, we've changed them based on advice, you know, and represented. So it feels like we're getting there. Yes.
Thank you, Zach. Is that okay, Councillor Blundell?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Great. Okay. I know Councillor Amanda Williams also had some concern on Com1 page 28.
Hi, sorry, I'm just trying to close the doors to make sure the dogs don't come in. Yeah, just a second. I've got problems with my system.
I'll come back to it.
Sorry, I'll come back in a second. I've just got to leave the room because one of the dogs has just come in. So I just
no problem at all. No problem at all. I don't believe we've got Councillor Gebby back yet, so I'll ask the question she had concerns, very valid concerns on. So on page 30, it mentions the pay awards, and it says that it doesn't know what the pay awards actually are. And Councillor Gebby pointed out that we already know it's 1.75%. And can we have an update on where we are within the position now and how we're going to mitigate the pay award? Is that one for Jill, please?
Okay, I'll do my best to answer it. Yes, I don't think that anything's been absolutely signed, sealed, and delivered on teachers' pay and other pay, absolutely nailed down yet. But we've certainly budgeted for between 1.75 and 2%. 2%. Certainly was the upper limit in our budget, so we set that out in the MTFS. So as long as it stays below 2%, then we should be okay on the budget. There is some indication. I was just looking at emails quickly to see if I could see whether I'd missed anything. There's an indication that the Welsh Government may make a contribution to the teachers' pay award, which obviously would be extremely welcome. The suggestion at the moment is that Bridgend would fund the 1% and they would contribute the 0.75, but that's not yet been formally confirmed as far as I know, because I've been on leave until today. So I was just frantically looking to see whether I'd actually missed anything. So that will help us, obviously, if that happens. But of course, that's only for a part year, because obviously the teachers' pay crosses our financial year, runs for the academic year. Okay. So I'm fairly comfortable at the moment that we've budgeted for the pay awards as set out.
Thank you, Jill. Has Councillor Williams come back in yet?
Hi, yes,
oh,
I am
hello.
in. Sorry, I cannot access the papers on my laptop, so I'm relying on my phone, which is obviously a small screen for me to swipe through. But apologies for that. Right, yeah. Back to Comms 1. The last paperwork we had in every other meeting, it's been the same amount, obviously, that we're going to save, and it said very likely to be achieved. We've achieved the 300,000 saving, but yet this number hasn't changed, and that's where my concern is. Firstly, that the number hasn't gone up or down based on exactly how many asset transfers we have done. It's remained the same. But there are asset transfers that I'm aware of that haven't progressed at all, such as if you look at Great Western Avenue, that was going ahead before we had the meetings with regards to charging for sports, and yet nothing has moved on that now since, well, for 18 months, 2 years. And I'm wondering, how are we going to achieve these targets? And we're saying we've achieved them when these long-standing asset transfers are still stuck and not moving on. So that was my first question. Thank you.
Zach, please. Thank you.
Okay. Firstly, the £300,000 is the MTFS saving target. It's not the exact amount that we have saved through CAT transfers, so the £300 is the MTFS budgetary saving target that we have to achieve. If we overachieve, the column that would be green would still read £300,000. That's the budgetary saving target. In terms of achieving it and what we need to do to continue to achieve it on an ongoing basis, and the reason it's amber is we have had a number of successful CAT transfers, and they are happening on an ongoing basis. We had great success with a lot of the bowls facilities going over last year. We've had a number of clubs and playing fields that have gone, some in Porth Call, there's quite a few dotted around, and there's a number that are sort of on the cusp of going at the moment. We can provide, a full breakdown of, where they all are for members to view, but there are more to do, absolutely, and to make sure we continue to achieve the £300,000 on a recurring basis, we will need to ensure that we keep the CAT transfer process going, and some of this has been slowed down with resources. We have needed more resources in our property department. But we have recently recruited, so good news, we've managed to recruit an extra person into our property department to help with the lease process. That's a very recent appointment. We've just appointed a person who hasn't started yet as an assistant to the CAT process with the CAT officer itself. So we're bringing in resource because we identified a while ago that we needed more resource to actually make CAT happen at a pace. So we are bringing in more resource to make it continue to happen. And the reason we're saying we're proposed that we're going to make the savings is we're going to manage to make the savings this year's anyway. And bear in mind, there were some savings in the parks area because we weren't having all the sporting activities taking place in the early part of the year that we normally would have seen. So there were some benefits from that have kind of helped us along, even though we've achieved quite a bit of it through CAT. But to continue to make that saving, we do need to see more of the CAT transfers take place, absolutely. And ones like the councillor has identified, we do need to get those across the line, and we do need to move them on. We've brought in more resource. We've had good success so far, and there's a large number of CATs have happened, but we do need to continue to see more of them across the line. And as more and more go, then potentially, as Jill's alluded to, savings don't end at the end of this year. We will have to identify future further savings, and there's possible, depending on how many we can get going, we can then tally up to see if actually there are further savings that can be offered if the number exceeds the 300,000.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please. I just wanted to say, because Zach offered to provide details of those that have been asset transferred so far. I think for us to better understand this, because I know when it comes to scrutiny as well, everyone would be asking the same questions again on this, to better understand that we see what has been asset transferred so far and what the list is looking like that we've got to transfer, how many we've got going forward, and what we're going to be hoping to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we can provide that. I think there's been about 12 that have gone in the last year, but we can provide that full list and full breakdown. I'll get Guy to give us the latest list and we can circulate it to all members.
Thank you very much, Zach. And Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you, Zach. I was just going to suggest that we ask Guy to produce that list, and myself and Zach meet with Guy on a regular basis to understand. It was 13 that we actually transferred, even though we'd intended to do 15, but obviously that was a fantastic amount of work that was carried out by Guy, considering that we weren't able to be doing an awful lot of other things because of the impact of COVID. But yeah, we will make sure that our list is up to date. What has happened and what those in line are. But I think it'd be also useful for members to understand what some of the stumbling blocks are, because a lot of the ones that don't get over the line as quickly as people think they're going to may be barriers that aren't just BCBC barriers. But as Zach has said, we'll make sure that with the new resource we've got, we'll be doubling our efforts on these. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll There's no more questions on that section, so I'll come to Councillor Martin Jones now, who just wanted to have make a comment on the overall approach to the overview of this scrutiny. Councillor Jones, do you want to come in?
I think, Chair, my points have been raised previously in terms of what the headlines are. Jill has provided a response, and perhaps we can revisit this at our next scrutiny meeting to review the next quarter.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And I had a Councillor Amanda Williams again, who came back on that with regards to, on the back of Martin's question, with regards to the one council approach. Do you want to say any further, Councillor Williams?
Thanks. I think it's just important to keep banging home that we do need to see this one council approach that we've been promised, because I'm still struggling to see it. And I just have to, for the record, every meeting I come to say the examples of where we're busing children to Coity Primary School who live 450 metres away because there's no safe routes to school. And again, we're putting in footpaths, but we're not putting street lighting into them, so they're not safe routes to school. And I think we need to be speaking to each other, because we're not going to achieve full savings if departments are working in silos, which I still see in time and time again. So to save money, we're looking at each directorate separately. We need to be looking at this as corporately, as savings corporately, not just departmental savings. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Baldwin, please.
To reassure Councillor Amanda Williams, that's what we do at Cabinet, and that's what we do at informal Cabinet, and that's what we do at CCMB. We do make sure that we don't look at things in silos. And obviously that's why a lot of these discussions happen where, I've been on a ward walkabout with Councillor Williams in Coity to try to identify where things can be done not in silos. So I don't just deal with them across my community's portfolio. I come back and I speak to other people and my other cabinet members to make sure we are trying to tackle those things. I'm not saying we're perfect, nobody's perfect. But we don't just work in a silo mentality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. I've got nobody else coming back in on that, so I'll just ask the committee. The committee's requested to consider the recommendations of the cover report set out in paragraph 9.1 on page 24 of the agenda pack. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Move.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. I'd like to thank all the attendees for answering our questions, and you may leave or stay, depending on your choice for our next item. Thank you very much all. So item 5 is the review of the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel. Thank you, Jill.
Okay, Chair. So for the purposes of the recording, I'm Jill Lewis, the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. You have a report in front of you this morning on the review of the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel. And just to refresh on the background, obviously the purpose of the, I'll call it BREP for short, was previously agreed by Council on the 6th of September. And you'll see at 3.1, the main purpose of BREP is to achieve consensus on the direction of the budget over the life of the medium-term financial strategy, achieve a detailed overview and assessment of budget proposals, to get a corporate understanding, very much picking up on the corporate approach, and appreciation of the draft budget proposals, assist the Council to develop the budget for the forthcoming year, and to facilitate a firmer understanding of the budget setting process and the draft proposals and the budget consultation process. So those are very, very clear, I think, in terms of the tasks for BREP. And then at the meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of February, the committee made a number of recommendations regarding the medium-term financial strategy, which you'll recall you do each year. And one of the recommendations was that you reviewed and defined what the role and responsibility of BREP is. That we did that as Corporate Management Board and Cabinet, as CCMB, and then brought that back to Corporate Overview and Scrutiny to consider, which is where we are this morning. At 3.5, the response from Cabinet was reported to the meeting of Cabinet held on the 23rd of February, and obviously then to Council on the 24th, which reinforced that recommendation. So the current situation is that at the first meeting on the 14th of July, I presented some principles around the role of operation of BREP, which had been put forward from Cabinet and CCMB in accordance with the recommendation to facilitate a discussion. And those are summarised at 4.1. At 4.2, following that discussion, members of BREP had discussed the paper and the following comments were made. So a suggestion that members could look at deep dives into the areas of most concern, that to confirm that there was a role for BREP going forward, because it's not a statutory committee, so if members felt that it didn't work, there isn't any need to necessarily have BREP, and that members should be looking at the wider budget issues, not just the proposals that have been put forward. Once an in-depth discussion had taken place, recommendations should be passed on and a feedback loop achieved so that BREP got the feedback very early from those discussions. The need to remain corporate and strategic for the budget, and I think this is important really, BREP to receive suggestions from the scrutiny process, which is part of what the role should be. So each of the formal scrutiny committees should be considering parts of the budget, and then BREP acts as the coordinating panel for those suggestions to inform its work. I think again, members stressed the importance of its non-partisan and non-political way of debating the budget. It is a confidential panel that receives information that's not in the political, in the public domain. And then obviously, again, picking up the corporate whole council perspective is absolutely critical. And I think this is for members as well as officers to look at this from a challenging point of view rather than necessarily advocates for a particular service. So it's really important that both members and officers approach the budget from a corporate whole council perspective. And then we had a second meeting of BREP where we formulated those discussions and agreed that this report would be presented to COSC this morning. The only thing to add is at 4.5, a member asked that that the disappointment that so few members had been in attendance for the second meeting of BREP needed to be recorded. So I think the importance of attendance wherever possible to make sure that we have got that collective agreement going forward into the MTFS is important. So, Chair, that's all I was going to say really. It's up to the committee now to ask questions, consider the report, and then either endorse or not the review of the role of BREP.
Do we have any questions on the report, please? There's no questions coming up. So the committee is requested to consider the recommendations at paragraph 9.1 on page 37 of the agenda pack. Can we endorse the report, please? Mover and seconder?
I'll move for the endorsement of the report, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. And seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jill.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on to item 6 is the Social Services Annual Report, and I'll ask the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing to present the report. Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to bring what will be my first annual report as Director of Social Services in Bridgend to scrutiny for pre-scrutiny prior to this report being presented to Council. The annual report is now something of a standing item in terms of Council's annual agenda. This will be the 11th such annual report that Bridgend County Borough Council will have received, first one from myself and obviously from Sue as my predecessor. This particular report is unusual in that it covers 2 years. Obviously, last year being the global pandemic, there were other priorities at the time of year that the annual report would have been presented. And that meant that this report statutorily needs to cover off the 2 years. It does have a focus, probably quite understandably, of what we have lived and worked through during 2020-21. And I think that's because the operating context for social services in Wales has changed entirely, as it will have done across the UK and indeed the world. The format of the report is prescribed by Welsh Government, so I do apologise in advance for the length of the report, but it relates to the quality standards that are part of the Code of Practice of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and it is important to report on all of those quality standards. The format is being reviewed by Welsh Government, so you may see a slightly different report next year in terms of that format. And I think of the report as serving 3 functions, really. The first is to celebrate success, and I think that's critically important, and critically important particularly to celebrate the achievements of our frontline workforce, but also to make the lives that the people in our county borough with care and support needs very, very visible. So it is about celebrating them and the barriers that people with care and support needs have to overcome, as well as celebrating what our workforce do to support them to overcome those barriers. Very importantly for me as statutory director, the report also has, I think, a key purpose in advising members of the issues that social services and wellbeing face, of risks and challenges, and it is with that independent professional voice that I advise Council, and I've had the opportunity to do so. And I think, relating back to the first agenda item, those issues, risks and challenges have never been so great, not just in Bridgend, but across the whole of the UK and indeed the globe, given the challenges that we've faced, and then also to set out the priorities for the coming year. So I'm really hoping that Scrutiny this morning gives some good feedback around whether that balance is right, and what I very much try to do is to write a very balanced report in terms of both the positives and the areas which are presenting challenge. So in terms of positives, one of the things which I think has been particularly a strength within Bridgend over a number of years, but really came to the fore in last year, is that relationship with the third sector and the whole wellbeing offer that we make across the county borough. So we have had a priority over a number of years about developing strong and resilient communities that understand their own issues and are able to support people within those communities themselves. Through the work with BARVO, this is highlighted in the report. During the pandemic, 4,444 people were supported in such a way. I do keep checking that figure because it sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But the vast majority of those people who were supported through third sector report didn't go on to require ongoing support from social services, from statutory social services. And really, since the Social Services and Wellbeing Act came in, that whole shift to prevention and early intervention has been critical to what we've been trying to do, and have largely achieved to support people to live the lives that they want to live with that little bit of support and connection, and that doesn't require people to go on and to require sort of statutory social services. We have continued throughout the pandemic and prior to work on our service developments to improve outcomes and performance, and I really think you can see some of this coming through in the report in the section around children's services. In October last year, just after I started in Progend, we launched a new model of social work practice in children's services. We've refreshed our early help, working very closely with colleagues in education and family support as part of that whole council approach, our early help and permanence strategy and action plan, and that will go to next scrutiny as well. And we've seen some really leading edge services around the edge of care, connecting families, our rapid response service, Baby in Mind, which members will be aware was the overall winner in terms of social care accolades, which is a fantastic achievement. Our integrated family support, family group conferencing, the Reflect service, all of which have got that aim of preventing children and families from seeing their needs escalate. And on the statutory side, there's been a lot of focus around remodelling residential provision to ensure that children and young people have their needs assessed in a very holistic way before placements and ongoing placements are planned. And in the last year, that was highly successful in that there were no children and young people at any time in any unregulated placements during that last financial year, which is a significant improvement from previous years, but also significantly different from other parts of Wales. We've continued to progress, and obviously Welsh Government has had a priority around the safe reduction of the number of children who are looked after, and we've seen some small reduction in the overall numbers, but we've also seen, I think, quite a significant reduction in the number of children and young people who are not living with their own families or connected people to their own families, and I think that supports that overall strength-based approach. And we're continuing to develop our foster care services and our support for special guardians as well. Children's services also saw last year quite significant improvements in performance around assessment timescales, timeliness of visits, and as I say, in terms of use of residential placements. We've also, with again colleagues in wellbeing in the third sector, really looked at that whole approach around the family. So I know that Cabinet members have been to see this year's summer hubs quite recently, but we started that process last year with the Brackla Summer Hub for children with disabilities. Parents and carers are now supporting their own sort of groups and inclusive network through the Bing Inclusive Network, and we're really trying to support our engagement of young carers as well. In adult services, last year was incredibly busy and very, very difficult at times in adult services because of the challenges of the pandemic. And, you know, adult social care really was at that front line of the pandemic management right throughout. So there were nearly 4,500 contacts into adult social care. Nearly 2,000 people accessed our community resource team services, which was less than the previous year, but reflected some of that delay and sort of, I think, now catch up in the delay in people accessing services. We had a number of performance measures where it was the first year and we were establishing baseline, particularly around those intermediate care type services and the reablement services, as there was a new Welsh Government framework. But we did see, you know, significant numbers of people, vast majority of people going through our reablement services either required no ongoing support or had a reduction or the same level of support. So those services continue to be really successful. We continued to assess almost 4,500 people there. We reviewed people's care, but lots of the work of adult services last year really was that front line in terms of actively safeguarding people. At the height of the pandemic in January this year, we had no nursing homes in the county borough where new placements could be made because of the levels of COVID, and we were in daily meetings to keep people as safe and well as possibly could be, and to work very, very closely with NHS at the same time as doing that. We also really focused our support on carers during the pandemic, including a 24/7 telephone support line with the South East Wales Carers Trust, and we also administered an emergency carers grant, which is one of the things we've had really positive feedback from carers around, because that was really flexible in providing sometimes very small types of support, which really made the difference to keep carers going as well. So there's really lots to celebrate, but it is really important that I am very open and honest and transparent about in terms of advising of the challenges that we face moving forward. So we've already talked in Scrutiny this morning about the challenges in terms of care and support at home for adults. There is an increase in need for adult services post-COVID. And indeed, we're still living with COVID. We're seeing increasing numbers, aren't we? So those numbers will only increase. And we're seeing that particularly in domiciliary care. As I said earlier, as a consequence of delays in people accessing NHS treatment, long COVID, the extended lockdown period, the fatigue of carers. And when I say fatigue of carers, I mean both family carers, but also, you know, our workforce in terms of carers as well. And those workforce challenges have never been so acute because of competition for workers, because workers, I think, are reevaluating their own lives in some circumstances. And, you know, that whole balance that we all need within our lives is impacting on our ability to meet that increasing need and demand in a timely way. We're also facing significant challenges in terms of our children's services workforce. Recruitment and retention of safeguarding social workers is one of our sort of key priority areas, and something that we're particularly concerned around. And particularly in our safeguarding teams and in our new care experienced children team, we need to make sure that we have some new ways of looking at things and looking at the structures within those teams to support the consolidation of safeguarding, our continued focus on safeguarding, which clearly was our priority throughout the pandemic, and to make sure that we consolidate safeguarding arrangements across the whole council and have that right response and that right professional response to our most vulnerable children. As part of that consolidation, we want to make sure that we really embed that strength-based working in children's services. You know, launching a new way of working at the height of the pandemic means that, you know, you're necessarily constrained in terms of the way that you would want to take that forward and embed it, but equally you're constrained unless you've got a permanent secure workforce in order to embed practice within. So that is why that's such a key priority. And then the sort of final risk, which I really highlight in the intro to the report, is about sustainable investment in the rebuilding and recovery of social services and wellbeing. Welsh Government have recently launched a social services recovery framework, and we're very busy at the moment developing our recovery plans for what is in line with the timescales in that framework, the short to medium term, which takes us to the end of this financial year. And I think that's really important in terms of timescales, because at the moment it still feels day to day as if we're in response mode a lot of the time in terms of the ability to address the needs which are coming forward. And we do need to move in a very measured way back to more business as usual in terms of both operational but also progressing our strategic priorities. But to get from where we are to where we need to be, we do need a different sort of recovery and rebuild over the next 6 months, and through that to be investing money very sensibly, you know, and to make sure that we're investing in the right things to get us through to the new financial year from both a service and financial point of view. But the long-term investment in social services, I think, as has already been said in costs this morning, remains something which is important to be tackled. Some of those issues are beyond Bridgend, but they impact on us in Bridgend as they do in other parts of Wales. And then what the report also does is just then to set out what are 8 priorities for this coming year, which hopefully align to addressing the risks and issues which I've set out. Firstly and most importantly, that the right voice and choice and control of people is at the heart of everything we do. If we ever move away from that, then we've lost the purpose really of what good social services and well-being is about. Our second priority, not surprisingly, given what we've talked about, is workforce. We can achieve anything if we've got the right people. Without the right people, we really struggle. And it's first and foremost about retaining the workforce we have, supporting their well-being, supporting their ongoing training and professional development, and then about recruiting the workforce that we need for the future and developing them and really making social care alongside other challenging recruitment areas stand out. And there is a national campaign running over the next 3 weeks or over the 3 weeks that we're currently in, and anything as members that you can do to promote that campaign around the social care workforce would be very, very helpful. Strength-based commissioning and service development and stabilising the social care sector is our next priority, and that is really important because that's part of our long-term planning. Clearly, how we commission care and support at home, supported living, there's big pieces of work progressing there, but equally how we support the care home sector to adjust to the challenges that it's faced. Safeguarding will always be a priority, and you know, you would want that to be there, but some particularly significant safeguarding issues that we are facing, and need to really work as part of the regional safeguarding board to make sure that we learn lessons and embed improvements in practice in a very systemic way and a very supportive way of our workforce when that is something that we need to do. We will continue to work in an integrated way with key partners around the needs of individuals, families and carers, very much a whole council approach, but a whole Bridgend approach in terms of our work with the health board, with the third sector and other partners. So the work with the third sector brings me on to the next priority, which is to continue to work with them to support resilient and connected communities and support communities to recover and to address the scourge of health inequalities, and which impacts in terms of need for social care as well. Our next priority is to continue to develop strength-based practice, to focus on what people can do and their many strengths and capabilities and resources, as well as to commission the right services when they do need us to do that. And then the final priority is to continue that shift in the balance of care, to continue to be as preventative as possible, to intervene as early as possible in people's lives, to present needs escalating to a point where only intensive services will meet those needs, which are not always the best for the individual, but also the most expensive services as well. So just to summarise, what I'm trying to get across in the annual report is that this last year has been much creativity, there's been a lot of innovation, but there's been a lot of sheer hard graft as well from people right across the whole system. Safeguarding has always been central, even in a public health-led pandemic. And our citizens and our communities have been badly impacted and lost many people, and that recovery and renewal piece for social services as part of that response is going to be really important. Our staff really need the time and space to recover at their own pace, or we will face the risk of burnout and attrition, and I think we're seeing some of that at the moment, because that pace hasn't slowed, and if anything, that the pace has accelerated as we move into the final 2 quarters of this year. Services have adapted to new working practices, and there's some lovely examples of that, hopefully within the report, but others that we'll bring into the presentation for council. And stabilisation and renewal is now critical over the next 6 months, and to reinforce the point that I've been trying to make, that our workforce is critical to success, and we are very dependent on all parts of the workforce to this success, and never has this been more so the case. So thank you for the opportunity to present to Scrutiny. I'm very happy to take questions and any comments that I might be able to build in the final version for council.
Thank you very much, Claire, for presenting your first report. Nobody underestimates the difficulty you've had over the last months. It's been absolutely crazy, and the amount of work that your staffers need to do just to keep us all ticking over and keep everyone healthy has been absolutely incredible, and my thanks goes out to everybody on your team. Can I bring in Councillor Amanda Williams, please?
Hi. Sorry, I know I raised some questions in the pre-meet. I've got some other questions as well for clarification. Do you want me to just do a few of them?
Yeah,
I know
that's fine. You
up as
carry on,
well.
Amanda. Nobody else has got their hands up at the
Yeah,
moment.
I think
so.
there are as well. There's two others. I think Councillor Burnett wanted to come in, I think, as well. And I think there was Rod Shaw's got his hand up on my screen.
Can't see anybody.
So,
oh, right,
and they
okay.
put their hands, yeah, they put their hands up before me if you want to.
Yes, Councillor Burnett, you'd like to come in first, would you?
Thank you. I'm not going to go on because obviously my main reaction to this would be given at full council, but I can't let the opportunity to thank Claire and the team for putting this report together. And you know, despite the awful year that we've had, there were so many examples that made me smile. There was a lot of good to come out, and the resilience of our communities and our staff in sacrificing, you know, their own family lives in order to keep other families members safe was just sort of awe-inspiring, really. So it's a thank you on behalf of myself, Cabinet, to Claire and all our social care teams, and then an appeal really to those of you that are scrutinising the report is to focus on the human aspects of every figure and the statistics that's there. You know, there is a human being behind it. We can't look at it in terms of financials and figures, and to be mindful that where you see a demand decrease in a column, those are people that are at home, lonely, worried, and didn't feel that they could bother anybody by their own concerns. So, and that now, you know, the problems haven't gone away, they've escalated, and now they're presenting, and we have to provide an even greater level of care. It's just not to look at it at face value in terms of statistics, just try and empathise that the person behind the statistics. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Right, Councillor Williams, can I ask you to come in with your first question, and then Councillor Rodshaw, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Williams, if that's okay, if they're separate questions.
Yeah, I've got questions on 3 different aspects of the report. I've got some on the children's services, and then some on adult services, and then just a general question as well. Do you want me to start with the general one, because that's the one we raised in the pre-meet?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, it was just about the staffing generally across everywhere, because I've seen on the news the Welsh headlines, it's saying about the problems with staffing, with carers, but I think also generally across most areas of, we can't get lorry drivers, we can't get this, that and the other. So I think there's a general lack of people out there who are either looking for work or I don't know where they are. But with them saying that most local authorities have got a problem with recruiting carers, how are we going to, because obviously everyone's after the same people, how are we ensuring? I know we've got these promotions out, we know we've got we're sharing recruitment drives, but how are we going to ensure that we are getting these staff, because it's the same throughout all authorities? Are we all on the same pay grades throughout the authorities, or are people like Cardiff, for example, can they offer a higher rate? And how are we going to ensure that we get the staff here in Bridgend? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because there is a national piece around workforce, a very strong sort of national area of work for the social services workforce, working very closely with Welsh Government, with Social Care Wales, to firstly promote the sector, secondly to look at sort of really difficult issues such as the implementation of the Welsh Government manifesto priority around a real living wage for care workers, thirdly around professional standards, working very closely with Social Care Wales around that, and the registration not just of professional social work staff, but the registration of care workers and all that goes with that. So it's really important that as Bridgend that we're very key players on that national stage, and informing and co-producing policy where necessary, and we do that. Indeed, one of my colleagues is going to a meeting next week around care worker real living wage and implementation there, so we participate fully there. We're also then part of our regional workforce development team, and we get a grant from Welsh Government which comes down to us regionally for workforce development. We work very closely with colleagues in Rhondda and Taff and Merthyr around that. But for us in Bridgend, we are keen to promote Bridgend, and for us to be as successful as we possibly can in retaining and recruiting the Bridgend workforce. And there's the first starting point, I think, for us is to understand the nature of the workforce that we're looking to recruit, and that's why we've got different action plans for our social care workforce than we do for our social work workforce, because it takes us to different places in terms of the actions that we need to have in place. So for our social care workforce, largely people who live in Bridgend will work in those roles in Bridgend. The competition for those roles will be from different sections and sectors of the foundation economy locally, and what we need to be doing and what our action plan reflects is working with colleagues in the employability part of the council to be promoting to the sector to people who are looking for work, to make sure that we've got the right training, development, induction programmes, not just in-house but across the sector here, in order to support people into care as a career of choice. We need to be working very closely with our local colleges, with Bridgend College, because there's lots of people who will do health and social care qualifications via the college, and not all of them go on to work in health or social care. So that's something which we've got a set of actions around. We need to be promoting care as a career within our communities, and to not just have our Bridgend-wide recruitment fair, which we've got, but we've got a range of actions around local recruitment fairs in the areas which people live and work in. And we need to understand the barriers for people to come into care. So there's two for me. One is that we get our contracts right, both from an in-house and working externally, that we understand the other pressures on people, the impact of the benefit system on people, and the number of hours that they can work. And one of the key things around working in care is that you're expected, for the most part, not entirely, we do have some walkers, but for the most part you're expected to drive. And so we're trying to think really innovatively and creatively about how we can overcome that barrier to people to have a car which functions before they come into work. So we've got a range of actions at a local level around the care workforce. Equally then on social work recruitment is a different part of the workforce. Our field is far wider in terms of the sort of pool in which we're fishing for professionally qualified social workers, and we need to be promoting Bridgend as somewhere that social work is valued, somewhere that it is supported very well through training, development, supervision, management, who really understand what matters to social workers and what makes their work-life balance achievable. We need to be looking at how we structure our teams and to make sure that we've got the right number of experienced social workers built into our structures in the most pressured teams, and particularly focusing on the risk that we've got around our safeguarding teams in children's services and the care experienced children's team. And we need to be looking at how we work with the universities, and over the medium term how we grow our own. So one of the things that we've done this year is to second more people, it's 8, onto the social work degree course than ever we have before. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because it is a degree course, there's a 3-year lead-in time for those individuals to come through and be qualified. But we need to make sure from here on that we're doing that every year, so that within a number of years we're in a position where we're training people up in Bridgend, they understand and like our model of practice, and we're able to develop and grow people in the social work career, who are committed already to Bridgend and have been supported by us. So that's our medium-term solution. But in the shorter term, we need to make sure that we're really attractive as we possibly can across the profession.
Thank you very much, Claire. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Williams?
Only as far as to say that it all sounds fantastic, but what will we do if we don't get people coming forward? Which is my concern. Are we getting people applying already to and showing an interest to what we're already sharing and any job adverts?
I think it's really difficult. I wasn't meaning to make it sound fantastic. I was thinking these are really hard yards because we are competing in very overcrowded space in terms of both the social care worker and the social workforce. And so, you know, it's really difficult, and we're starting from a place where lots of people aren't coming forward wanting to do these jobs. We contrast ourselves with the care worker workforce with the NHS, where you know, people do come forward in quite significant numbers to apply for healthcare support worker jobs, but for whatever reason, and we do need to understand those reasons, people aren't coming forward in the same numbers either to work for us as a local authority in care jobs, and our terms and conditions are not incomparable. They're not the same, but not incomparable to those of the NHS, or to work in the independent sector, where clearly terms and conditions aren't as good as those we offer within the public sector. So we do need to understand, and we do need to do everything within those action plans to make ourselves as attractive as possible. In the short term, while we are facing the challenges, we've got to do what every other authority is doing. We've got to look at how we bring in workforce via agency, which can cause difficulties, but if that is the workforce that's available, what's most important is that we meet our statutory duties in both social work and social care workforce. We've got to look at how we do that in the best way that isn't disruptive, that you know, supports our workforce, and that retention piece being the absolute most important, and isn't something which causes more difficulties for the workforce that we already have. We need to look at how we can support people's needs in different ways. So we, you know, are really successful in Progen, for example, with assistive technology, and we've got to continue to promote that and look at how we manage need and demand for services in a way which is most effective and cost effective. But it is a real challenge. I wasn't meaning to make it sound like it was simple to achieve anything that's set out. It's really hard yards, and it does need that absolute whole council approach and you know, sets of aligned actions about what we do locally, regionally, and nationally.
Thank you, Claire. I know Councillor Burnett wants to come in from our cabinet member. I'll just bring us back to the actual agenda item, and I'm looking for people to question actually whether or not there's enough evidence in the report. I'm very conscious that you need comments that will help strengthen your report. So everything with Councillor Williams's comments, I hope that that's helped just to focus the area where there may be more questions. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and my feedback to Claire has been to strengthen as much as possible the evidence of the difficulties going forward. But yeah, I mean, there are a number of issues that I just want to extend on, really, and the fact that we don't have a national pay scale for social workers is extremely damaging for us as a local authority, because we don't have the resources and the budget of authorities such as Cardiff and Swansea, which are our immediate neighbours. And I've heard stories of social workers from Newcastle working for authorities in Wales because many of their much of their work can be done online. So we're not even competing with our own immediate bordering authorities. We're competing with authorities around the UK for experienced staff. And it's really important for, particularly in children's social care, that we have that consistency of staff. They form bonds and relationships with children and families, and that sort of experience and is really, really valuable, and it's not something that we can replace. So I just wanted to reassure members, really, that this is something that we're having long conversations on within the care workforce and social care, and we are really racking our brains for anything. I can really understand how difficult it is we have a lot of women in dom care on low pay, and the struggles that they're facing in terms of risk of losing universal credit through working overtime, you know, the sort of the stresses of keeping a car going or transport. when you're on a low income, you know, it's just, we have to be thinking those thoughts, and we have to be empathizing with the workforce, because we cannot let people fall through the hoop. We have to meet our statutory needs, and at the moment our workforce are working really tirelessly to ensure, and I really are going above and beyond to ensure that nobody suffers. But yeah, we're throwing everything we can at it.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Williams, is that okay with that section of the question, so that I can bring in Councillor Shaw?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. So Rod Shaw, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to comment. Claire, I need to say I did like the format of the report and continue to do so. And I wanted to offer my admiration of the whole of your department, the work you've done in what could only be described as challenging times. However, we are all aware that there is that the county is not a level playing field, and there's areas of significant deprivation still within the county. Could you give me or tell me how the socio-economic duty will affect your work now and in the future?
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw, and thanks for the comments. I should have said in the introductory remarks that Jackie Davis is on the call as well for us today, and so probably bring her in on the next adult specific question, if that's okay. Laura Kinsey has had to send apologies, but I'll make sure that the thanks to the workforce and to the departments go back to everybody across the directorate. I think it's a really good question in terms of the application of the socio-economic duty. You know, COVID, as many diseases, has been a disease of inequality, and we've seen some of our most deprived communities and the communities which suffer multiple disadvantage and deprivation most severely impacted. And then from a social care perspective, when we're looking at the services that we're seeking to develop, when we're looking at the services in place in common with all parts of the council, we need to make sure that we're properly understanding that duty and applying it, because it may mean that we have differential solutions in parts of the county borough than we do in others. So a bit of an example in very practical terms around some of the excellent work that's done through local area coordination and community connection. There are parts of the county borough where we need ourselves as a council, through our own employment and working with the third sector, to take on some of that leadership role, to make sure that we are really focused on the right set of interventions, and not just supporting people in terms of connecting them, but actually doing that active community development work where there are gaps in what is naturally occurring within communities. In other parts of the county borough, the more affluent parts, we necessarily don't need to take such a strong role as public services or even the third sector. There are really good examples, aren't there, of just thinking about the Porthcawl COVID-19 strategy group, where the community itself came forward and needed less of that intervention. So it's those sorts of examples I'm thinking where, you know, the outcome that we're trying to achieve for our populations are the same, but the means, you know, taking on board the socio-economic duty for achieving those outcomes might be slightly different dependent on what the gaps in resources are in those particular communities. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour for how we would be looking to apply the duty in very practical terms when we're trying to achieve those objectives. We're part of the CTM-wide group on addressing vaccine inequalities in outcomes and post-COVID inequalities in outcomes as well. So we're sort of working with our public health colleagues, and that's a really key partnership for us in looking at those evidence-based interventions to make sure that we are addressing things in the right way.
Thank you very much, Claire. Councillor Shaw's not come back in, so I'll move across now to Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks very much. I've got 4 questions. I just wanted clarification on if I do the first 2 and then the other 2. This is all about children's services. It says that, first of all, the number of contacts is down. It's 4742, down from 6810. I wondered if that was COVID related, or if we're moving in the right direction and it's generally the number of contacts is coming down. And also, then the number of children on the child protection register has increased to 201 from 165. Have we noticed that there's been an increase due to COVID because people are at home, and so families are at home together? Because I think the news has suggested, for example, that there have been a lot more domestic abuse since COVID because people are forced in that situation. And is that potentially a reason why we've seen an increase? That's the first two. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I was just writing them down as you were saying them, Councillor Williams. Yeah. So in terms of the number of contacts, it was a very unusual year to look at any trends, really, because there were times of the year when some of our normal referrers into the front door, and for children's services in Bridgend, we've got a single front door for information, advice and assistance, and for safeguarding referrals through the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which obviously continued to operate throughout the pandemic. There were times when some of those normal referrers were operating very, very differently. So if we think about schools are big referrers in for periods of the pandemic, whilst the vulnerable children provision was in place. Not all children and families who were eligible would always have accessed that. And obviously schools were seeing far less pupils in the normal way. So that impacted on referrals coming through from schools. There were times when primary care was operating quite differently, and health visiting was operating to quite a different model because of that public health led priority about reducing all but the most necessary and most sort of that where you couldn't mitigate the risk in any other way, contacts with individuals and families. So they did that. Those sorts of restrictions for services did impact on the number of referrals and the number of contacts that we had through into our front door. What we're starting to see now is a more of a normalisation. And as services come back on board as you would expect them to, there is some need and demand which didn't come through early enough, which is now causing some pressure on services. But last year it really did fluctuate dependent on the period of the lockdown, whether referrers were coming in or not really. In terms of the child protection register and the number of registrations, I'm quite comfortable with the level of the register in Bridgend. We are one of the higher sort of quartile of numbers of children on the child protection register in Wales, and I think I have confidence that in terms of the protection that is afforded to children on the child protection register, that it is quite right and proper that the register probably remains quite high at the moment, given the challenges that children and families have faced, and given the fact that, relating to my earlier answer, that there may have been some delays in children and families coming forward, and for a period of time that protection which the register gives is quite right and proper in terms of our ability then to statutorily intervene with families and to require them to work with us, whereas all sort of steps below the child protection register are voluntary care and support and early help level.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Amanda Williams, do you want to ask another question or come back in on that?
Yeah, so I've got two more. It says in the report, children go missing. There's 296, and then the total number missing is 99. I just wondered, is that children in our that are known to us, or is that a general figure for the whole of the borough? That's how many children missing is reported. And then out of those 99, do we know if there are numbers who are still missing, or are they all found? What happens after that? And then the other question I had was, I noticed you looking at Maple Tree House, you had 22 in the previous year, down to 9, and then supported living remained the same, but the report says we're looking to move Maple Tree House. Is that because of capacity issue? Will that increase capacity, and were the numbers down because of COVID, or another reason? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Williams. So first of all, in terms of missing children, there's a process which comes into effect whenever a child or young person is missing for a period of time, which we work very, very closely with South Wales Police around. We've done some work over the years, and indeed authorities across the South Wales Police footprint did with South Wales Police to look at how we sort of code things, because for some children they will stay out longer than their curfew, if I call it that, you know, the time that they're supposed to be home, and to look with South Wales Police about how we respond in the most appropriate and effective way around that. You'll have some children and young people who will go missing quite frequently, and some who will present quite significant risks to themselves, and where we are managing those sorts of situations, we always work in a very multi-agency way with our colleagues in the police and other partners where necessary, to look at how we support what the risk management plan is around that child or young person. I do not think sitting here that we've got any children and young people missing today, but we frequently do, and we're frequently working in that multi-agency way in order to support the child and young person to come back to where their home at the time is. And it's one of the sort of key processes and multi-agency safeguarding arrangements that we have in place is around our children and young people who go missing from time to time. In terms of Maple Tree House, there are some really exciting plans for the relocation of Maple Tree House, which will include additional capacity within that particular provision. We've got both emergency provision and short-term assessment provision, which both of which is critical and both of which is better managed separately. We need a far better building for that. We need a better location, which will also enable co-location with other aspects of our placement service, including the fostering team, which will enable the fostering team to really get to know the children and young people as they go through that detailed and thorough assessment that they have in the assessment unit. So yes, there are some exciting plans around that. We've been a little bit delayed in their implementation, but it is a priority for us going forward, that relocation.
Thank you very much, Claire. Councillor Jones, did you want to come in on that same question?
No, thank you. I have something separate, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Just last question then. It does link into Maple House, but it's on the inspection part of your report, and this is about how the inspections have gone. And I've seen something during lockdown on Wales Online about Maple Tree House inspections. There were issues, and there needs to be improvements. Now, before lockdown and before COVID, I was part of a rota visiting team, so I'd visited this facility and never seen any issues and was, you know, happy with what was there. But obviously now, during COVID and lockdown, we haven't been doing those rota visits. They've been delayed. They've been rightly put off. But then what the newspapers don't do is they don't report then on any improvements. So the last thing we've seen is things in the newspaper that there needed to be improvements in certain areas, but then they don't say. So I just wanted to confirm that there have been improvements. We're content now going forward, that everything's fine there, and also that whilst members aren't attending these facilities, officers are able to, and you are going out to not just Maple Tree House, but all in adult and childcare, that you're going out to all of them and looking at the facility there and making sure that everything's okay in each premises. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Yeah, it's very it's very interesting what the reporting that we get when things aren't going so well. I think in terms of the assurance that I can give around visits into premises, that the two responsible individuals we have for our care homes, our in-house care homes, are Jackie Davis for the adult care home provision, and Laura Kinsey for the children's provision. And Jackie and Laura continued throughout the pandemic to to undertake their responsible individual duties, which includes a very strong focus on quality assurance and linking in with the facilities. At times that had to be virtual in the last year because the risks around our care homes were so high, and all of that was very well evidenced. But as those risks and the mitigations to them reduce, then those quality assurance and the RI visits have been increasingly face to face. And indeed, and I know Councillor Burnett wants to come in, that in terms of the children's facilities, we've relatively recently gone round those ourselves as well to make sure that that we've got those eyes into those facilities as well, as the director and the cabinet member. We will need to look and work with you as members in terms of the reintroduction of rota visits. It's a really important part, isn't it, of what you do as members in terms of fulfilling your corporate parenting and your other safeguarding responsibilities, and probably now as we move through and we're into year zero in terms of levels of restrictions is the right time for us to start to look at that in a very sensible and measured way. So in terms of Mapletree House itself, we are not formally in any escalated sort of state of intervention from Care Inspectorate Wales. As we sit here today, we will continue to report through into the Corporate Parenting Committee as we move through, and CIW have continued to inspect from a regulatory point of view throughout the last year into regulated services, and undertook that sort of full quality assurance check on us and other authorities across Wales. For us, it was at the start of April, and all of those reports will be published, I think, in October this year, if they're still working to the timescales they'd previously communicated.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Burnett.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to step in and reassure that, yes, we are visiting. I am visiting. It's, you know, the same level of scrutiny is being given. With regards to Mapletree, we had a report to corporate parenting regarding the CIW inspections, and we had an update on the improvements that have been made and how that we are not in any special measures now. But yes, you're quite right, Councillor Williams, that's not what the press want to report on. So I'm really, it's a plea to elected members to put the correct information out when asked, because the reports are there, and if anybody has any questions to come to me and I can ask, because I think it's really important for facilities such as Mapletree, which our children for temporarily it's a home for our children. They're all our county's children. We don't have out of county children, they're our children who have suffered some of the most incredible adverse childhood experiences, and a lot of the problems that we have are environmental problems. It is the wrong building in the wrong location, and we've been working really hard alongside the children to design the next home for them, and to make it feel as if they are welcome, supported, comfortable, and have all the rights and needs met that we want all our children to have. So yeah, your support on that, members, would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burnett. I'll just bring in Councillor Martin Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I thank the Director and Cabinet Member for both reports. Clearly, the pandemic has presented us with many unique challenges, and our discussion previously regarding budget overspends, I think, perhaps illustrates this. But, you know, big thank you to all the staff who provide social services across all our communities, and I am sure all our communities appreciate the work and commitment. I have a question on the new corporate safeguarding policy. On page 42, the new corporate safeguarding policy is mentioned. It's actually on paragraph 4.11. And then on page 57, we have further reference to a revised corporate safeguarding policy, which I assume is the same document. Claire, you've touched upon responsibilities in safeguarding. Yes, of course, it's always a priority and central to all that we deliver. But if I just pick up on a paragraph on page 57 of the report, Claire, which says, as a statutory officer, I need to review, consolidate, strengthen safeguarding resources. My question to you, and I don't particularly, expect a long-tailed, protracted presentation, but how do you propose to do that? How do you propose to review, consolidate, and strengthen safeguarding resources?
Yeah, two things really. First of all, I think because it's a corporate, it's a whole council safeguarding policy, we need to make sure we're getting the right information from across the whole council, not just social services and education directorates, but all directorates across the council need to understand their interface with safeguarding, their safeguarding responsibilities. In order to do that, we need the right governance arrangement. So one of the things I'm looking to do is to establish a corporate safeguarding board that sits beneath CMB and CCMB and then reports up to them the right information around safeguarding. And to do that in order for that to work effectively, we need an officer to support us to do that. So in a restructure we are just concluding in children's services, there'll be a corporate safeguarding officer to support those processes, which we've managed to resource in the resources available to us.
That's great.
Yep, thank you, Claire. And of course, let's not confine responsibility of safeguarding to officers. We as members also have a role to play in relation to this, not only to our visits to various care homes, but in terms of reviewing corporate policy during the scrutiny process. And perhaps that is something that you could consider when you consider the activities of your safeguarding board.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And one of the things within the new safeguarding policy is that there will be an annual safeguarding report to members on the effectiveness of corporate safeguarding. So it'll draw out in a lot more detail than I'm able to do in the headlines in this annual report, the effectiveness of corporate safeguarding. That one will be one of the key duties of the new officers. The other thing we're looking to do sort of jointly between officers in my directorate and Lindsay's is to ensure that there's some further member training on safeguarding during the sort of next term for members, because you can never have too much training in this area, and I strongly believe that the most effective training is very context specific, so specific to your role as members of this authority, rather than sort of more general e-learning. So we'll be looking to deliver that training as well for yourselves.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Burnett.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasise the importance of us as elected members to attend all safeguarding training that's available, and also for those of us that sit as governors as well, because in our school governor role we have frontline safeguarding responsibilities, and I think it should be, particularly those that sit as LEA governors, I think it should be requisite that safeguarding training should be attended, which it isn't at the moment, but I think that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions, so I'm going to ask the committee to consider the recommendations of the cover report set out in paragraph 9.1 on the agenda pack. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Moving on to item 7. So good. Can I say thank you very much to officers who are leaving us now and cabinet members who don't want to stay. Thank you very much for attending and for answering our questions. Item 7 is the Scrutiny annual report, and I'll ask Meryl, our Scrutiny officer, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the committee with the draft Scrutiny annual report, which covers a 2-year period for 2019-20 and 2020-21. The Scrutiny is required to submit the annual report to Council with a review of how the function has operated for the previous period. Members will see the draft Scrutiny annual report is attached as Appendix A, and it provides detail on the challenges and outcomes for scrutiny committees and panels for the period, as well as identifying some areas of focus for improvement to ensure scrutiny continues to develop and achieve positive outcomes for the residents of Bridgend. I want to thank my colleague Tracy for the work she has done on compiling the information and the draft report during a busy time impacted by a vacancy in our team, which you heard earlier has now been filled. The recommendation is set out in paragraphs 9.1 on page 135. So the committee is recommended to consider and endorse the scrutiny annual report as attached for submission to council. So the report is the report that will go from this committee to council will be a report from COSC, and it's for the committee today to consider whether the report written by officers reflects the work done by the scrutiny function for the last 2 years, and if it's okay to go forward to council. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Meryl. I'd like to put on our thanks on record as well for the work that you've put in, as well as Tracy. I know you've been under massive pressure with the amount of work you've done, just 2 of you. You always say the team, but the team of 2. It's been incredibly hard work for you, and your report is great. And I'm wondering if anyone wants to come in and comment on the content. Councillor Williams.
I just wanted to reiterate what you've just said. They've been amazing. They do so much behind the scenes. People don't see exactly how much work they put into everything, and to do it with just the 2 of them has been phenomenal. And I think just well done. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and Councillor Blundell, please.
Yeah, I'd be remiss of me not to say the same, really. I think they've been brilliant, and even going to the meet, helping me with the city deal, Tracy's been going with me to that as well, to make sure and that we as chairs know what we're doing when we get into the chair. So just to say thank you, but I will bring up one point. I'm not truly bothered, but just in case there are people out there who moan about this thing, you spelt my name wrong.
Ah, right, okay. Sorry about that.
It's all right. I do it sometimes as well. I put a H in my name when there isn't one. But no worries. I just wanted to mention that. But thank you anyway, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all. So I'll ask the committee to consider the recommendations on paragraph 9.1 of page 135 of the agenda pack. A proposer and seconder, please.
I'll move the report.
Thank you.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, and our final item, well, last but one, item 8, which is our forward work programme update. Back over to you, please, Meryl.
Thank you, Chair. So following on from members' consideration of the forward work programme at the last meeting, the updated forward work programme for this committee is attached as Appendix A. The forward work programme for subject overview and scrutiny committees 1, 2 and 3 are also attached as appendices B, C and D, because this committee has responsibility for coordination and oversight of the overall forward work programme. And the recommendations monitoring action sheet for the previous meetings in April, June and July are attached as Appendix E to track responses to the committee's recommendations at the previous meetings as being carried out. And on page 164, the recommendations are there for the committee. I'll hand back to you, Chair, in case there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Meryl. I don't see any questions. I think we've got a good forward work programme. Oh, Councillor Blundell, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just to go to Appendix D, if I may, forward work programme for subject overview and scrutiny 3. Just to confirm, have we changed the date of our September 1 to October?
Thank you, Chair. I believe that there will be an announcement at Council to confirm that, and then subject to that, we will change the date. We've put holding appointments in diaries for members and invitees and conveyed that to them. So it's just about the fact that Council is not until I think the 15th of this month, and then it'll be formally approved and accepted.
Thank you for that, Meryl. No, I was just making sure I didn't want members to get confused between the 2 dates. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I think that's it, Meryl. I think we're all okay with we need a mover and seconder for the forward work programme update, please.
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Just a second.
Thank you very much. And item 9, urgent items. There are no urgent items, so I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance. And again, thank you, Meryl, for all the work you've done on this. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.